They say heaven is full of light, that when it moves with warmth, with grace. But what they don't tell you, what they never preach about, is that sometimes heaven moves in silence, and sometimes it moves in shadow. There was a night, one single night, when the sky didn't open with blessings or peace. It opened with judgment, and no one saw it coming, not because they weren't warned, but because they laughed at the warning. This isn't a myth. This isn't poetic metaphor. This is written, recorded, preserved in the pages of Scripture, and then quietly ignored because the truth is too heavy, too terrifying, too real. One angel, one mission, one night. 5,000 men, gone. They called it the Assyrian army, the most powerful military force of its time. A machine of conquest, ruthless, unstoppable, led by King Sennacherib, one of the most feared rulers of the ancient world, a man who believed no god could stand against him. He had destroyed cities, leveled nations. Now he stood at the gates of Jerusalem, and he mocked the people, he mocked the king, he mocked God. He sent a message dripping with arrogance. Don't let your God deceive you. No other nation's God saved them. Yours won't either. Imagine hearing that. Imagine being a believer in that city, hearing that the most terrifying king on earth is laughing at your faith, confident he will tear it all apart by morning. The people were afraid, but fear alone isn't what moved heaven. In the quiet, in the trembling, in the dark corners of the city, prayer rose like smoke, real prayer, not for victory, not for revenge, just for mercy. And mercy answered, but not the way they expected. God didn't send an army. He didn't send fire from the sky. He didn't even send a prophet to rally the people. He sent one being, one angel, and he didn't announce it. There was no flash, no trumpet, no voice from the heavens. There was only silence, a silence so thick, so unnatural it felt alive. And in that silence, something walked. Through the camp of the Assyrians, through the tents, past the fires. No soldier saw it, no guard stopped it, no blade touched it. It didn't come to fight, it came to finish. What does it look like when heaven passes through an enemy camp? What happens when divinity decides not to speak but to act? In the morning, the people of Jerusalem opened their eyes, expecting war, expecting fire, expecting screams. Instead, they heard nothing, and that silence made them afraid. When scouts climbed the wall and looked across the valley, they didn't see an army. They saw bodies, thousands, tens of thousands, dead. No signs of struggle, no swords drawn, no blood spilled on the ground, just silence and stillness. And in that silence, one truth echoed, louder than any scream heaven had answered, but not with comfort, with consequence. This story is real. It's in 2 Kings chapter 19. It's in Isaiah. It's in Chronicles. And yet, it's rarely told, rarely preached, because this isn't the God people want to talk about. The God who sends peace? Yes. The God who heals? Of course. But the God who ends 185,000 lives in one night with a whisper that God is terrifying. That God forces us to ask questions we don't want to answer. Why did he do it? Why send an angel to kill? And most of all, who was that angel? In the next part, we step into the arrogance of the king who challenged the divine, and what happens when man believes he is untouchable. If this stirred something in you, if this truth hit deeper than you expected, write in the comments, "I wasn't supposed to know this." And if you believe more people need to hear the part of the Bible no one talks about, leave a like. Because sometimes the silence speaks louder than the story. They say arrogance is loud until it's silenced by something greater. Before the silence of death came over 185,000 men, there was a voice that echoed louder than faith, louder than fear, louder than reason. It was the voice of a king, a mortal king full of pride and bloodlust. His name was Sennacherib, king of Assyria, conqueror of cities, breaker of nations. And he didn't just come to fight Jerusalem, he came to humiliate it. He stood at the gates not with uncertainty, but with laughter, not with negotiation, but with threats. He sent messengers to speak for him, words dipped in venom, letters laced with mockery. He wanted the people of Israel to feel abandoned by their God before the first arrow was even fired. "Do not let Hezekiah deceive you," they said. "Do not let your God in whom you trust deliver you." The messengers stood in the open, shouting, in Hebrew so everyone could understand. Children, elders, priests, mothers, all forced to listen as their enemy mocked the very foundation of their belief. He didn't just threaten their lives, he insulted their faith. Has any of the gods of the nations ever delivered his land out of the hand of the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim? It wasn't just war, it was psychological desecration. Sennacherib wasn't just attacking a city, he was attacking heaven, and still the people remained quiet, not out of fear, but because their king Hezekiah did something unexpected. He didn't respond with force, he didn't gather his army, he didn't craft a counter-threat. He tore his clothes. He went into the house of the Lord and he laid the letter before God. Imagine that, a letter of mockery, a scroll of threats, a page soaked in arrogance, laid flat on the floor of a holy place. And Hezekiah prayed, not for glory, not for vengeance, but for clarity, for justice, for truth to answer lies. He said, "O Lord our God, save us, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you alone, O Lord our God." That moment, that prayer, is where the fate of an empire shifted, because heaven heard, and heaven doesn't forget. Somewhere between the breath of that prayer and the dawn that would never come for 185,000 men, an answer was already walking. But here's what's most terrifying. Sennacherib had every opportunity to stop, to reconsider, to listen. He had heard the stories. He knew of Egypt's plagues, of the Red Sea, of Jericho. But pride blinds even the intelligent, and ego deafens even the wise. He believed he was untouchable, that no force, divine or otherwise, could challenge him. He underestimated a kingdom he couldn't see. He challenged a throne not built by men. And so when the answer came, it didn't come with warning. It came in silence, it came in darkness, it came in the form of a single being who didn't need fire or armies, because truth doesn't beg to be heard, it simply remains. In the next part, you'll witness what happened the moment that truth walked into the enemy's camp, a moment not of war, but of judgment. And it all began with a king who thought he was greater than God. When the prayer reaches heaven, it's easy to believe that prayer is a whisper lost in the noise of the world, that in the middle of fear, pressure, and chaos, heaven is just too far away to hear. But what if that isn't true? What if prayer isn't about distance, but direction? Hezekiah didn't have the numbers, he didn't have the power, he didn't have the strategy. He had a letter soaked in mockery and a heart full of desperation, so he laid it out on the floor, before God. He didn't scream, he didn't make demands. He simply exposed the insult and let heaven read it, and heaven responded. Because when pride dares to write to the throne writes back. That moment, that silent moment in a sacred room, was the beginning of the end for the Assyrian Empire. Hezekiah's prayer wasn't long, it wasn't poetic, it wasn't even confident. It was raw, real, and heaven responds to that. What followed wasn't noise, it wasn't warning, it was motion, a single angel dispatched, not to comfort, to correct. We often imagine angels as guardians, white robes, gentle wings, but the Bible doesn't always describe them that way. Sometimes angels arrive with swords, with purpose, with finality, and this angel didn't come to speak, he came to execute. There were no horns, no lights, no signs, just silence, the kind of silence that hums, that charges the air, that stops the heart without touching it. One moment the Assyrian camp was filled with strength, arrogance, and certainty. The next, death. No fight, no battle, no second chances. Just the answer to a prayer, one that was whispered and then unleashed. In the next part, we step inside that camp, and you'll see what judgment looks like, not from the outside, but through the eyes of those who never saw it coming. The whisper that wasn't heard, it didn't come with thunder. There was no earthquake, no firestorm, no celestial trumpet. It came with breath, with movement, with silence too still to be natural. The Assyrian camp was full of noise, the kind of noise men make when they think they're safe. Drunken laughs, idle conversation, swords resting against tents, fires flickering, horses shifting, and in the middle of all that, something passed through them. No eyes saw it, but flesh felt it. The temperature shifted, the wind halted. Time, for just a moment, forgot to move. A figure, unseen but not unfelt, walked from one end of the camp to the other. It didn't run, it didn't attack, it simply moved, past sleeping men, past confident warriors, past generals who dreamed of conquest, and with each step, a soul slipped, not ripped, not torn, removed. Some scholars believe it was the angel of the Lord, others say it was the spirit of judgment, a being beyond description. But one thing is clear, it didn't need a weapon, it was the weapon. The angel didn't kill out of rage. There was no emotion, no vengeance, only obedience. A command had been given, and heaven never misses its mark. One by one, like candles snuffed by unseen wind, the soldiers fell, quietly, effortlessly, some with eyes wide open, some with mouths mid-sentence, some still gripping swords they'd never swing. And when the final soul left its body, the angel didn't linger, didn't gloat, didn't wait to be seen. It disappeared the same way it came, without a sound, because true judgment doesn't seek attention, it seeks completion. And by morning, it was done. In the next part, we'll see what happened when the people of Jerusalem looked out beyond their walls and saw what no one expected, an army destroyed not by force, but by the presence of something unseen. When the divine walks through the camp, they say war leaves behind noise, echoes of battle, screams, smoke. But when the divine walks through a battlefield, it leaves behind something else, stillness. By the time the sun began to rise over the horizon, the camp of the Assyrians had transformed into something unrecognizable, a graveyard without a battle, a massacre without a fight. From the walls of Jerusalem, the people waited in dread, every heart prepared for the worst. They had heard nothing. During the night, not the march of soldiers, not the cry of the wounded, only silence, and that silence was terrifying. But when the first rays of morning light spilled over the land, and the watchers climbed to the high points of the wall to see, no one was moving. Tents were still standing, fires still glowing low, but the soldiers were still, too. Still, not asleep, gone. They sent scouts, carefully, fearfully, each step taken as if death still lingered there, and what they found was beyond comprehension. Rows upon rows of lifeless bodies, no signs of wounds, no blood, just eyes open wide, hands frozen, in mid-motion, as if whatever came in a breath. Words spread like wildfire, whispers first, then cries, then shouts of disbelief, of fear, of awe. Jerusalem had been spared, but not by swords, not by strategy, not by man, by something else. And suddenly, all the taunts, all the threats, all the mockery from Sennacherib meant nothing, because the proof of power, true power, was lying cold across the valley. The people didn't celebrate. There was no cheering, because what stood before them wasn't victory. It was a warning, a reminder, that the unseen is not the unreal, that when heaven moves, it doesn't always come with fire. Sometimes it comes with finality, and the angel gone, not a trace, no footprint, no sound. just the echo of its obedience and the weight of its presence. Sennacherib returned home, broken, humiliated. He had faced no army, fought no battle, yet lost everything, and in the house of his God he was murdered by his own sons. The story ends not with glory, but with silence, the same silence that began the night when one angel walked among men and left judgment in its wake. In the next part, we will step away from the battlefield and look at what kind of being could carry out such a task. What kind of angel has the authority to erase an empire in a single night? When heaven doesn't blink, it's comforting to imagine angels as gentle, to believe they whisper comfort, guide us home, guard us quietly in the night. But what if there are angels that don't guard, but execute? What if some are created not to protect, but to carry out judgment with absolute terrifying precision? The angel who walked through the Assyrian camp didn't hesitate, didn't ask questions, didn't blink, because heaven doesn't blink. Blinking is a human thing. Blinking is hesitation. Blinking is mercy, mixed with fear, but the divine doesn't hesitate. It moves in complete obedience. It completes the task, and it disappears. That's what terrifies us most. Not that it happened, but how easily it happened. 5,000 men, eliminated, not by war, but by a presence that didn't even speak. There was no warning, no defense, no resistance, just the carrying out of divine will. So who was this angel? Some believe it was Michael, the warrior. Others believe it was the angel of the Lord, a manifestation of God himself. But the truth is, we don't know, because Scripture doesn't name him. And maybe that's intentional. Maybe the point isn't who he was. Maybe the point is what he represents. The unseen line between mercy and justice. A line that once crossed doesn't get redrawn. It gets erased. There's a reason this story isn't preached often, because it confronts something raw and real. That God isn't only comfort, he is consequence. And consequence doesn't knock, it enters, moves, and leaves only silence behind. That night was not about rage. It wasn't about revenge. It was about divine precision. It was about what happens when heaven doesn't blink. And if that angel was sent once, he can be sent again. If that story happened once, it can happen again. We're not as untouchable as we think, and sometimes the greatest miracle isn't the parting of the sea. It's the removal of a threat before it touches you. If this truth awakened something deep in you, if it made you question what kind of protection truly surrounds us, then leave a like and write in the comments. Now I understand the silence, because what comes next will take us deeper into the unseen world of angels not meant to comfort, but to cleanse. The trauma of the living. The dead don't speak, but the living carry the memory. And sometimes memory is a heavier punishment than death. When the sun rose and the people of Jerusalem saw the valley of corpses, there were no shouts of victory. There was no joy. There was only breathless horror. Imagine standing on the wall and realizing your enemy didn't run, they didn't retreat, they were wiped out, but not by war, by something they couldn't see, couldn't hear, couldn't stop. Some of the soldiers, the ones who didn't sleep in the camp that night, they came back. They were the ones who saw it firsthand the next morning. They didn't scream, they didn't speak, they stood frozen, looking at friends, commanders, brothers, all gone. Some fell to their knees, some fled and were never seen again. Some ended their own lives because the human mind can't process silence like that. Silence that kills, silence that judges. Years passed, the event became a tale, a legend, a story preachers skip. But the few who witnessed it, they were never the same. They stopped sleeping through the night. They claimed to hear whispers in places where no one else heard a sound. They spoke of eyes in dreams, of pressure on their chests as they tried to breathe. Not guilt, not grief, residual presence, as if the angel left something behind, not to haunt, but to remind. That night was not just an act of judgment, it was a statement, and for those who survived it, it was a permanent scar on the soul. Not all miracles feel like blessings. Not all salvations come without a cost. And sometimes being spared means being chosen to carry the memory. In the next part, we'll question the nature of that presence. Not the angel's mission, but the force that sent him. The angel of death or something else. The Bible never gives him a name. Not here, not in this story. It simply says, the angel of the Lord went out and struck down 185,000 in the camp of the Assyrians. That's it. One line, one sentence that collapsed an entire empire. But who was he? Was it Michael, the warrior of heaven? Was it Gabriel, the messenger turned executioner? Or was it something older, something we were never meant to see? Because the scriptures don't describe his face, they don't describe his form, only his function. And maybe that's what's most terrifying. This angel didn't speak, didn't warn, didn't give a sign. He just moved, and every breath in his path was silenced. Some ancient texts outside the canon speak of beings called destroyers, spiritual forces that are neither demons nor angels in the way we understand them. They don't serve out of love. They serve out of order, unquestioning, unstoppable. Could this have been one of them? Because this wasn't just judgment. This was surgical. This was cold. This was execution. And what makes it darker is the realization that this being didn't come on his own. He was sent. Which means somewhere in the invisible realm, a voice gave the command, and the angel obeyed. No protest, no hesitation, no emotion, only obedience. That's the part we forget, that this being didn't act out of anger, he acted because he was told to. So who gave that command? Who holds the authority to unleash such a force? The answer is simple, but it's not easy. God did. And that answer unsettles us because we want a God who only comforts, who only blesses, who only whispers peace. But the God of the Bible is also the God of fire, of flood, of judgment, and he does not change. That's what makes this story so haunting, not just that an angel killed 185,000 men, but that he did it on divine orders, because sometimes mercy wears a face we don't recognize, and sometimes justice walks in silence. In the next part, we'll ask the question that should unsettle every soul. What if this angel comes again? What if he comes again? It happened once, a divine order, a silent arrival, a massacre in the night, and then silence. But what if it wasn't just a historical moment? What if it was a pattern, a glimpse, a warning? Because the Bible doesn't say that angel was destroyed. It doesn't say he returned to heaven to rest. It doesn't say the sword was laid down forever. It just ends. And maybe that's the loudest part of all. What if he's waiting, not as a threat, but as a tool, ready, still, listening for the next command? Because if that kind of judgment was issued once, what's stopping it from happening again? Look around. The arrogance of kings hasn't disappeared. The mocking of God hasn't gone silent. We live in a world that laughs at holiness, that sells truth for convenience, that builds altars to ego and calls them progress. What if another letter is being written? What if another ruler somewhere is crafting words soaked in pride aimed at heaven? And what if, right now, someone is laying it before God in prayer? What happens when heaven answers again? Will it be fire this time, or another shadow, another whisper, another step through the camp while the world sleeps? Because the angel didn't come with warning, he came with permission, and that permission came from above. People think judgment will come with signs in the sky, with disasters, with chaos. But what if it comes like last time? Quiet, precise, unstoppable. No announcements, no negotiations, just silence and then aftermath. That's what should make us tremble. That's why this story was never meant to comfort. It was meant to awaken, because the same God still reigns, the same angel still exists, and the same silence can fall again. And if it does, will we recognize it before it's too late? In the next part, we'll go deeper into what this story truly reveals about the nature of divine justice and what it means for us now. But if this chapter made something shift in your spirit, if it opened your eyes to a fear we've long ignored, leave a like and write in the comments, "I see the pattern." Nbidi, the angel, left something behind. He came and went in silence, but the silence never left, because some things don't vanish when the being is gone. Some things stay, invisible, intangible, but real. The angel did his work, precise, complete. But what lingered after was presence. Those who walked through the Assyrian camp after that night described something no one could explain. A weight in the air, a sense that they were being watched, not by the dead, but by something above them. The animals wouldn't enter the space. The birds avoided it. Even the wind refused to cross the valley the same way. It was like the earth itself remembered. Some priests said they felt it during prayer. A stillness too, deep to be peace. Others claimed to see shadows move across walls when no one was there. It wasn't haunting, it was marking, as if the angel had left more than judgment, as if he had imprinted reality with a trace of heaven's weight. Not everyone noticed it, but those who did were changed. They didn't speak of it openly, but they prayed differently, lived differently, because they had seen what the world tries to forget, that God is not just love, He is also the final word. And when His word walks through flesh and bone, nothing is untouched. Some believed the angel's presence faded with time. Others believed it spread, that in every place where pride rises and truth is buried, that same silence begins to settle, not as punishment, but as a warning, a sign that heaven is watching again, and the sword is never too far away. In the final part, you'll see what this pattern means for us, what this story demands from a world that keeps forgetting what sacred really means. The pattern we refuse to see. Some stories were never meant to entertain. They were meant to warn. And yet, we turn them into metaphors. We wrap them in fiction. We tuck them into sermons about faith and love, and skip the parts that burn. But the pattern is there. It has always been there. Every time pride rises, judgment follows. Every time the divine is mocked, silence answers. Every time people believe they are beyond consequence, something comes to remind them they're not. From Egypt to Babel, from Sodom to the Assyrian camp, from kings to entire empires, the pattern repeats. And in every moment, there's a pause, a delay, a chance. Before the fire, before the flood, before the angel walks, there's always a moment to turn back, to listen, to repent. But we don't, because we convince ourselves that the silence means safety, that the delay is permission, that the absence of thunder means we were right. But judgment doesn't need to shout. It only needs to arrive, and when it does, it's too late. That's what makes this story unbearable. That's why it stays buried, because it doesn't end with a lesson. It ends with loss. Loss that could have been avoided. Loss that came not from hate, but from a decision that could not be reversed. This isn't about fear, it's about recognition. Recognizing the moments we've ignored, the warnings we've softened, the line we keep crossing, thinking mercy has no limits. But even mercy has a gate, and when that gate closes, judgment walks, not with rage, not with noise, with precision, with silence, with purpose. And maybe that angel isn't in the past. Maybe he's already walking again, through governments, through cities, through homes, through hearts, looking, listening, waiting for the command. This is the story we were never supposed to tell, the truth we were never supposed to hold. the God we were never supposed to fear. But now you've heard it. Now you've seen the pattern. Now you've stood on the edge of what they tried to hide. And if this opened your eyes, if something inside you whispered, "This is real," then leave a like and write in the comments, "I wasn't supposed to know this." And if you want to walk with us through more truths like this, subscribe. Not for us, but for the fire that needs to stay lit inside you. Because now you've seen the silence, and silence doesn't forget.